Chapter 15. Moving on. Belinda never returned the phone call Samuel had made. He tried again as soon as we were home from the hospital, and then came to my room to tell me that she was still not there. He left a message for her to call immediately, but she didn't call us until late the next morning, claiming that she had gotten home too late. I didn't speak to her. Samuel told me she was on the phone, but I instructed him to tell her just to come home. There was nothing to say over the phone anyway. I realized from the way Belinda reacted that day and the days that followed. For her, Daddy had died a long time ago. She refused to remember him or think of him as anything but strong and vibrant, the man who had become a prisoner in his own body. The stroke had turned him into a stranger, and she couldn't mourn a stranger the way she could mourn her father. That was the most generous I could be toward her. Of course, she put on a good act for everyone, mourning and crying about not being at Daddy's side and not speaking to him before he died. She never called him on the phone because she couldn't stand his stuttering. So she'd really not spoken to him since returning to Boston. Jacob was still too young to understand all that had happened to his grandfather. Thelma did a good job with him, explaining that Grandpa had been called to heaven. Daddy's funeral was even bigger than Mother's because he had developed more business associations since Mother's death, and practically everyone sent a representative. Someone told me the police declared it the biggest funeral procession in North Cape. Because of my condition, we decided not to have people over after the funeral. People offered their condolences at church. I, under Dr. Covington's supervision, was sent directly to bed. After I rested and had supper, I told Samuel that he and I and Belinda had to have a family meeting immediately. "Can't it wait till the morning, Olivia? Everything is still so fresh," he complained. "That's why it's best to do it now, because time won't make any difference in regards to what has to be done." I could read it like the front page newspaper. The headlines were in the eyes on his brow. "She's gone, isn't she?" "Where did she go?" I followed before he could even attempt to deny it. "Out with some old friends," he confessed. "Tonight?" "She buried her father this afternoon and she went out to party with some of her friends tonight." "Why did you let her go?" I demanded. He shook his head. "I don't think I could have stopped her, Olivia. She doesn't listen to me," he exclaimed. "Well, why didn't you come and tell me she was planning on leaving? I didn't want to disturb you more than you already are. You're only 10 days from your due date." She has no respect for her family. She doesn't even have the smallest concern about what people here think of us. "Maybe she'll just have a quiet dinner and come home," Samuel suggested. I stared at him, and the optimism leaked out of his face, turning his hopeful smile into a grimace of despair. "Do you want me to try to find her?" "Of course not. How would that look? And besides, she wouldn't come back with you," I thought for a moment. "This confirms what I was thinking I should do," I muttered. "What?" "Never mind now." I swung my feet over the bed. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" "I'm going through some documents. Family documents," I said. "I have everything in the den. Just tell me what you want and I'll go get it and bring it up to you, Olivia. You don't know where it is, and it would take way too long to explain." "I'll be all right," I snapped. "Hand me my robe." "Please do as I ask, Samuel," I said when he hesitated. "I won't sleep if I don't do this now." Reluctantly, he got me my robe and slippers and escorted me to the den. I sat at my desk and opened the top drawer, taking out the key to my wall safe. He stood watching every move. "You can leave now, Samuel. I don't need anyone hovering over me. I'm fine." "I can help you. There's nothing for you to do. Watch television, read, relax," I said. It came out more like an order. He stared a moment. All right, he said, flashing me a tired look and a weak smile. As long as you're fine, he added, and then left. Soon after Daddy had his stroke, I had gone to the files and removed his personal documents. I took his will and his titles and deeds and all of the estate materials home and put them in my own safe. I had planned to read it all with Belinda present, but now I thought it would be better if I look at everything first and decide on my own what would and would not be done. Daddy had left half of his estate to her and half to me, but he had placed a great deal of trust to be kept for our children. It was considerate estate. Belinda would have more than she needed and too much to waste. The only stipulation that gave me any promise and hope was the clause providing that in the event either she or I became mentally or physically incapacitated, the other would become the sole executor of the entire estate. Daddy had some foresight there, I thought. Belinda had no idea where any of the trust funds were kept, nor did she have the slightest inkling as to how much we had. Money and property details were always boring to her. She simply wanted to have whatever she wanted and when she wanted it. That was all that concerned her. I sorted through everything, planned out the actions I would take during the next few days. Belinda didn't return until very early in the morning. I had gone back to bed and fallen asleep, which was a blessing, for I had awakened to hear her stumble around in her drunken state. I would have gone into a rage. She didn't get up until late in the morning. I brought everything up to my room and had it organized. I told Samuel to bring her to me as soon as she had some breakfast. She wanted only black coffee and came upstairs in her nightgown, groaning, her hair wild, her eyes drooping. You look like a shipwreck, Belinda. Where did you go? Just out with some friends who were feeling sorry for me, she replied. I guess I had too much to drink, but I couldn't help it. I was feeling so miserable and everybody kept buying me a drink. She paused and looked at me, as if just remembering. I, too, had lost a father. How are you? Fine, I said sharply. Sit. What do you want so early? I just want to rest today, she moaned, her eyes suddenly full of panic. I don't want to be bawled out or hear any lectures. Just take a seat, Belinda, I said firmly, and glared at her until she took a seat to my left. Samuel stood with his hands behind his back, rocking on his heels. She's just like Daddy with his family meetings, Belinda muttered to Samuel. He glanced at me and then stopped. His smile. I ignored her and opened the folders. The documents pertain to Daddy's estate, I said. The property will liquidate now, moving the funds into investment devices. I am designated as the executor, so I will handle the work, I said. Actually, I wasn't the sole executor, but I knew she wouldn't challenge it, and it would be easy to do everything I had planned just by adding her signature wherever it was needed or getting her to sign the paper. She would never read it first. Good, she said, obviously relieved it was only business, and started to stand. There's more, I snapped, and she sat again. Don't you care? I never knew much about business affairs, Olivia. You're the expert. I'm sure you'll do everything right, she said. Thank you for your vote of confidence, I said dryly. I plan to sell the house. She looked up sharply. The house? She looked from Samuel to me. Sell Daddy's house? Of course. What do we want with such a big home now? Why would we incur the cost and all those servants to keep it up? The proceeds will go into the estate and be better invested. Daddy made provisions for our children as well. There are things that have to be done correctly to avoid losing too much estate taxes, shifting funds, activating the living trusts. She shook her head, then clapped her palm to her forehead. I have such a splitting headache, Olivia. I'm sure you'll do the right thing, she said. Only, she lowered her hand. Finally, serious thought went through the maze of bubbles to reach her sleeping brain. Only what, Belinda? If we sell the house, where will I live? She looked to Samuel for the answer, but he had his lips pressed so tightly closed the corner of his mouth were white. You can live here for a while until you find something sensible or get married. She laughed and bounced in her seat. Why is it that you and Daddy were always trying to get me married? I don't know Daddy's reasons, but mine are purely revenge on the male sex, I said. Samuel finally started to crack a smile. It flashed like car headlights in his eyes. You're not very funny, Belinda lamented. You're all set. You have a husband, a nice little boy, another child coming, but I have no one. Whose fault is that? I shot back at her almost as quickly as her words touched my ears. She stared and then grimaced in pain again, squeezing her temples. I have a horrible headache. I have to go back to bed. I don't care where I live, she said, rising. But if you sell the house and I move here, I don't want you treating me like a little girl, she warned. Don't act like one, and I won't, I replied. What about your schooling? I asked, and she reached the door. Oh, I told them I won't be back now. Besides, you just told me I don't need to work anymore. I'm an heiress. She laughed and left. Samuel turned to me, lifted and dropped his shoulders with a big sigh. Okay, that's done, he said. I want to go to my father's house, I told him. Right now. Now, Olivia, you're flying in the face of caution, doing everything against Dr. Covington's wishes, he lectured. You can come along or not, I said, putting the folders aside. Then I looked up at him, my eyes firm and burning. When something has to be done, I do it. He shook his head slowly. I know, he said, I know. His voice was full of resignation. All right, I'll go along with you. Should we take Jacob along? No, he'll only wander where my father is, and I don't have time for that, I said. What I really meant was I would be too emotional difficult for me, even with Thelma's assistance. In fact, the entire visit was emotionally draining. The house had become dark and foreboding to me ever since Mother's death, and then at Daddy's stroke. It was a shell of what it had been. Not that it wasn't nice or clean. Effie had done a great job of that, and that was why I wanted to meet with her as soon as possible to explain what I wanted her to do. I'd like you to remain a while and keep the house up so it shows well when the real estate agents bring prospective buyers around, Effie. I will give you 6 months' salary when you're terminated here, and of course, I'll do my best to find you another position in the area if you'd like. I've always been quite pleased with your work. Thank you, Mrs. Logan. That'll be fine, she said. I made some arrangements with the groundskeeper. I wasn't physically able to go through the whole house and look at everything, planning on what I wanted back at our home and what we could donate or sell, but I did wander through the first floor and spent some time in Daddy's den while Samuel checked upstairs in the boathouse. Sitting there, I couldn't help but recall my private talks with Daddy. He always treated me like an adult, and I know he had a high regard for my abilities. I wonder how often he looked at me and wished I was his real daughter, born of his blood. How important family meant to him, so important that he would swallow what would have certainly choked most men. There was something so masculine about Daddy's den, from the dark woods to his cigar humidor and his pictures of seafaring men battling the elements. I rose and walked to the rear of the house. Samuel was standing on the dock looking at the sea. Off to the right to the trees was the unmarked grave. No one but me knew what was buried there. It put a chill in me for a moment when I recalled Daddy's look of terror when he placed the wrapped fetus in afterbirth in that box. "Samuel," I cried. He turned. "Take me home. I'm feeling faint," I said. He hurried back. I paused to gaze once more at the dark place under the tree and thought, soon I shall sell this land and never return. Less than a week later, I went into terrible contractions and was rushed to the hospital. I gave birth to our second child, a boy whom we named Chester for Samuel's grandfather. I knew he was disappointed. He wanted a girl, and so had Daddy. I remained in the hospital for 3 days after Chester's birth. Belinda came the second day to see the baby and visit me. She wore a bright autumn gold blouse with a dark blue skirt, with hair tied back neatly. Belinda looked very young and vibrant. Lying in the hospital bed just after giving birth, I didn't feel very pretty. Neither did the contrast between us seem more vivid. "Don't worry about Samuel," she told me. "I'm looking after him. Jacob's very excited about his brother, too. I took him for a walk yesterday," she said. "You mean you're acting like an ant?" "Yes," she said, laughing, "but a young ant. He was so curious about everything and so serious. I'm afraid he takes after you, Olivia. Whenever he laughs, he looks guilty." "That's ridiculous," I said, but I knew she wasn't wrong about Jacob. He was thoughtful, pensive little boy, and very bright, too. "Nelson Childs told me you asked him for a job," I said suddenly, locking my gaze on her. Her eyebrows rose. "He said I asked him?" "Yes, why?" "It's the other way around, Olivia. When he heard I was in business school, he asked me, and I told him I wasn't going to work for anyone but my father," she claimed. "Where did you see him, Belinda?" I questioned skeptically. "In Boston. He stopped by to see me when he returned from the Bahamas," she replied matter-of-factly. I couldn't doubt her. "Why did he do that?" "You'll have to ask him," she said. "I was just as surprised as you are." She opened her purse and plucked out her makeup mirror to check her face and then looked at me. "I'm telling you the truth, Olivia. Stop looking at me like I'm making up some lies." "Fine," I said. Inside my stomach, hot coals turned. Was she telling me the truth and Nelson lying? Was he just covering for himself in case she told me? Was there any man that I could trust, I wondered? "You look deep in thought," Belinda said. "I think, Belinda, there's no shame in thinking. The shame is not thinking." "Chester's a very sweet-looking baby," she went on, skipping the topic to topic like she was a hopscotch game. "I think he's going to look more like Samuel. Samuel thinks so too," she said, adding that because she thought it would bother me. "Oh, well, I'm not troubled by that. Samuel's good-looking." "Yes, he is. Maybe not as handsome as Nelson Childs, but good-looking," she teased. I gave her my best scowl when she laughed. How could she vex me when she tried, I thought. The next morning, Nelson came to the hospital with Samuel to see Chester. "He's a fine-looking baby," Nelson said. "Your father would have been very proud." "Daddy was hoping for a granddaughter to spoil," I replied, and then added, "like he spoiled my sister." Everyone's always spoiling her. I watched Nelson's eyes. They shifted guiltily away, and he quickly changed the topic. Sometimes the world around me seemed like it was filled with small pools of deceptions, lies, that, like quicksand, would pull me down into confusion if I wasn't careful about where I stepped. I'm sure we'll have a daughter someday, Samuel declared with his chest out. Not someday soon, I said, and the two men whose only pain in birth of their child was the pain in the pocketbooks laughed heartily. Thelma said she would have no difficulty looking after Chester as well as Jacob. She truly enjoyed children and wanted to be more occupied. I considered her my best discovery, and I was truly grateful I had her. It meant that as soon as I was on my feet, I could return to work and feel confident that somebody reliable was looking after our children. Events of our life took back a quick pace when I returned from the hospital. Less than a month after I had put Daddy's house on the market, we had a viable offer. We closed the sale satisfactorily and then went about selling and donating and bringing home the family possessions I wanted. I told Belinda to go through the house and see if there's anything she cherished, but she never went back once. She had gotten her own things. Nothing apparently held any sentimental value for her. It didn't surprise me. She spent most of her youth finding ways to leave home. In my mind, she used to look at it like a hotel, and all the rest of us, even our parents, as servants. Belinda didn't settle down after Daddy's death. I learned that she had done passingly well on the business school and might have even graduated if she had wanted. But real work was not something she sought with any enthusiasm. Somehow she was able to occupy her time with her frivolous activities, traveling with friends occasionally, and always talking about doing something dramatic. Maybe I should become an actress. I might try out for a part in a play in the Providencetown Playhouse, she declared. I met a young director who thinks I might have just the right stuff to be the character in the play he's doing. I'm seeing him this weekend. For a private audition, she added, batting her eyelashes at Samuel. Amusement with her made his eyes brighten as they had fireflies dancing in them. Acting might be just the right thing for you, Belinda, I said. It comes naturally. She took it as a compliment. That's what I think. I'll see. I'm really not too excited about having to memorize lines and to be in the same place every day for weeks and weeks, she said. Becoming an actress was just another thing she tinkered with, never really intending to do anything serious about it. To Belinda, there was nothing worse than being bored. She had the attention span of a hummingbird, hovering over some sweet possibility with the moment and then jerking herself away to explore another. Even when she talked to someone at a party, her eyes wandered to see if there was someone else whom she should be speaking. The only way she would ever get married was if she was placed in a straitjacket and brought to the altar, I thought. When it became clear that Belinda was now someone with some money, she attracted an entirely new clique of male acquaintances, dangling the promises of serious relationships like fresh bait. There seemed always to be someone calling her. She played with them, amused herself with them, and then dropped them, as if they had contracted the plague. Still, they came around, called and begged for an opportunity to win her affections. I never stopped being amazed at how gullible most men were. It went on like this for nearly a year, and then suddenly a week went by and no one came. She remained at home watching television and reading magazines, having only an occasional phone call from one of her girlfriends. She stopped in at the offices more often and showed some interest in what we were doing. Samuel took her to lunch and answered her questions, and to keep her out of my way and amuse her. Soon after, she started to go places again, but as far as I could see, she was always by herself. She had her own car, of course, and took herself wherever she wanted. Her comings and goings became more unpredictable, and when I asked her what she was doing now, she was cryptic and did not brag about the men that were coming along and the places they were taking her to and the money they were spending on her. One day at the office, I went to Samuel and asked him about it. He seemed to know more about Belinda these days than I did. He thought for a moment, sat back and nodded. I think she has someone, he said, someone a little more serious than her usual male fare. Who? Is this someone who will disgrace us? Is that why she's being so secretive? I don't know, he said. I'm just guessing. I really don't know. Why don't you ask her? I've been asking her, and she's avoiding answering me. Have her followed, he suggested with a smile. I recalled her once accusing me of doing just that. Maybe I will, I said. He widened his eyes. I was joking. You wouldn't, would you? We have a great deal at stake in this community, Samuel, not the least of which is our family reputation. Congressmen, judges, major businessmen and their families have all been invited to our home. You're being judged by the company you keep, I said, recalling one of my father's adages. Of course, he said, if you think it would be necessary. I don't want any more dramatic surprises, I affirmed. He shook his head in despair, but didn't disagree. I let another week pass before deciding I would take some action. There were nights Belinda never came home. She claimed she visited a friend down on the Cape and had gone on someone's boat, and she got angry at me for even asking. I'm not a little girl anymore, Olivia. I agreed to the sale of Daddy's home and my living here as long as I wasn't going to be treated like a little girl. I don't ask you where you go every time you leave the house, do I? That's quite different. Where do I go but places with my husband or places for business reasons? Still, she said, I don't give you the third degree, do I? Live and let live. You're spending money like it's going out of style, I said. I have a pile of bills on my desk that would choke on an accountant. What I spend, I need to spend, she claimed. Isn't it mine to spend? At this rate, you'll deplete your inheritance in a few years, I told her. She shrugged. There'll always be someone to take care of me, I'm sure, she said, with an arrogant confidence that made my blood almost hot enough to boil. Frustration like arthritis crept into every one of my joints. Why I should even bother with her, I don't know. I vowed to put her out of my mind, but I couldn't help worrying about what she would do to this community. Samuel and my reputation had been growing dramatically. We were in everyone's A-list for parties again. People didn't necessarily like me, but they definitely respected me. I wasn't going to see all of that jeopardized by an empty-headed, self-centered sister. Finally, I picked up the phone and called someone a business acquaintance had recommended. He was not a private detective so much as he was an insurance investigator. His name was Nicholas Cosin. I didn't meet him at my office because I didn't want Samuel to know I was hiring him. I went to him and told him what I wanted. I don't have to emphasize how important it is for you to be discreet, I said. Of course, that's what I do best, he claimed, and gave me his retainer, along with pictures of Belinda. I could have waited and saved money. Less than 10 days later, Belinda came to me on her own and revealed everything. The dark shadow that had been lingering behind my heart moved over like a conquering army, full of joy and pleasure in its victory. I had been right. I had always been right. Sometimes when the evenings were warm, after the children had been fed and were put to bed, I would go out and sit on my gazebo. Samuel liked to read his papers or watch some event on television. More and more lately, he would go down to the wharf and talk with the fishermen. I didn't mind the solitude. I welcomed it. My days were hectic and full of interaction with people. It was good to have some quiet moments during which I could reflect on how things were going and what I hoped to do for the future of the family. I was already thinking about Jacob and Chester's prospects, what kind of men they would be, the wives they would have. I hoped I would be bigger influence on them than Samuel. Tonight the moon was big and bright, making it seem sinister for a moment and then happy again because a cloud kept streaking its face. "There you are," I heard and turned to see Belinda come out of the house and walk towards me. She was wearing a sleeveless light blue cotton dress and her arms gleamed in the moonlight. Despite her cavalier lifestyle, her drinking and late hours, she still maintained an attractive figure and remarkably soft and rich complexion. Why she should be so blessed, I did not know. What I did know was she took it all for granted, never thanking her lucky stars. There was a warmth, steady breeze tonight. I made some of the strands of my hair dance wildly. Belinda paused at the steps of the gazebo. "Honoring us with your presence at home tonight?" I asked. "Or am I invading your privacy by asking?" She looked toward the sea. "You're gonna hate me," she said. My heart stopped and started. "I thought you believed I already did," I replied. She turned. "Don't joke with me, Olivia. I'm in trouble." I took a deep breath. The fear in her voice, the smallness and little girl sound softened my hardened heart. I heard Daddy's deathbed whisper, urging me to promise to watch over Belinda. "What have you done now?" I finally asked. "I don't know how it happened. I've always been very careful ever since that time," she said. She sat on the steps with her back to me. I didn't move. Against the horizon, a luxury liner with its glittering lights appeared. Although it was too far from shore, I imagined I heard music and laughter of people that were on that boat. All their family problems had been left on shore. How I wish I could fly over the water and be dropped on its deck. "So you're pregnant again?" "Yes." "Are you certain?" "Yes," she said. "I went to the doctor." "Don't worry," she said quickly. He's not a doctor here. He's a doctor in Boston. He called me today to tell me I was pregnant. And like last time, you have no idea who the father is because you were with so many men in such a short period, right?" I said, with a voice dripping with exhaustion and disgust. It was like deja vu. She turned. Even in the darkness, I could see her eyes burn. "No, I know who the father is. He's the only one I've been with in the last month or so," she said. "Really? Well, that's some relief. Do you intend to marry?" I asked. "No, we can't get married." "Why not?" "He's already married," she said. I held my breath. Ice seemed to enter my lungs and shrivel with a constricting pain. It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. "Who is it?" I finally found the courage to ask. "Don't be mad at me," she said. Was she going to name Samuel? My own husband had betrayed me. Was that why he was always defending her? Why he didn't want me to hire a detective? I had left them alone too many times. I should have known. What a fool I've been. What could be more embarrassing? I didn't reveal my fears. Why should I be mad at you? It's not like I didn't expect you'd come and tell me this one day. Not with the life you lead, Belinda. Promise, she asked. Oh, stop these childish games. Out with it. And that's that. She turned. Nelson, she said. Nelson Childs. How many times can you die in one life? How many times can your heart sink? Can everything that kept you buoyant and energetic be swirled away from you? Did I ever go to sleep with some fantasy, without some fantasy involving Nelson? Could I ever stop my heart from pounding when he approached or touched me, or when we danced at affairs? His laughter lingered in my ear, his breath on my cheek. How I enjoyed the way he always drank me in with his eyes, those laughing eyes full of sparkling lights. When it came to Nelson Childs, I was a cockeyed optimist. It was practically the only time I was. You're lying, I said. I'm not, I wish I was, she moaned. When did you, and he, we met in Boston whenever he had to be up there for trial or do legal business. I couldn't help it, she cried. Why would he bother with you? He's happily married, I said, desperately trying to find reasons. His wife's always pregnant. She's pregnant now. I don't know why. He likes me. He always liked me. But not enough to marry me, she wailed. Then why didn't you stay away from him? How could you let this happen? I don't know. I was bored and Nelson was always lots of fun. I sat there fuming. I didn't know who I was angry at more, Nelson or Belinda. After I had confronted him with what I had seen him and Belinda doing in the boathouse, he assured me like nothing would happen like that again. Men should never be permitted to make promises, I thought. Their tongues should shrivel as soon as they begin to say the words, I promise. I guess I have to go get an abortion, she said through her tears. I thought for a long moment. No, I declared. What? No, you're not getting an abortion, Belinda. You're not letting him get away with this. Not this time. I forbid it, I said. Well, what will I do then? I can't have a baby. What am I going to do with a baby? She wailed. It's not just your baby, is it? It's Nelson's child too, I said. She whimpered and sobbed and stared up at me. What do you mean, Olivia? You're going to make him keep the baby? His wife won't like that, will she? I'm not thinking about his wife right now. Did he think about his wife when he was with you in Boston? Did he? I snapped at her. She shook her head. I don't want to have another baby, she cried. I'm scared. That's stupid, Belinda. I've had two, haven't I? The reason you had that horror show the first time is because you kept it a secret and you didn't do the right things. It'll be different this time. Yes, I said with a strong sense of determination, turning my spine to steel. It will be quite different. This time you have me. I'm still scared, she said. It gives me the chills just thinking about it, she said, shaking herself as if she were shaking off ice water. And I have nightmares. Every night. I can't fall asleep unless I drink myself to sleep. Olivia, do you hear me? I snapped out of my deep thought and glared down at her. I said I'll be with you, didn't I? You don't have to be afraid of anything, I told her. Now does he know yet? Well, I demanded when she hesitated. No, I thought I'd do what I had to be done. I wasn't going to tell him. I'm afraid to tell him. I was afraid he would just blame me, or he would deny it, or make me look foolish. He's a very important man now. Do I have to tell him? No, I said softly. You don't have to tell him. I'll tell him, I said. You will? She asked. drying her eyes and sniffling. Yes, I said, turning back to the sea. The luxury liner was gone. There were no lights except the reflection of the cold stars above. Yes, I will.